All right, today we're pulling back the curtain on something that's, well, a critical piece of pretty much every major project you see out there: the contract bond. Think of it as the financial safety net that makes sure those big promises are actually kept, protecting everything from our roads to our public buildings. But how does it really work, and what's to stop a company from just walking away from a huge project? Let's get into it.
So imagine this scenario. A company lands a massive government contract to build a brand new highway. Awesome, right? But partway through, they realize their costs are just skyrocketing. What's to stop them from just throwing up their hands and abandoning the job? I mean, that would leave taxpayers with huge delays and a project stuck in total limbo.
Well, the answer is a really powerful, legally binding financial promise, and it's called a contract bond. This is the tool that enforces accountability, and I mean from the very second a bid is placed all the way to long after the project is finally finished.
Okay, so to really get how these bonds work, you first have to know the three key players in the agreement. When you put them all together, they form what's best described as a triangle of trust.
First up, we have the principal. Now, this is the contractor, or the supplier, the one who actually promises to perform the work. So going back to our highway example, this would be a company like Sunshine Construction PLC. They're the ones on the ground, actually doing the building.
Next in our triangle is the Obligee. This is the project owner, the organization that's being protected by the bond. A perfect real-world example here is the Ethiopian Roads Authority, or ERA. They're the ones who need that highway built, and they want a rock-solid guarantee that it's actually going to get done.
And completing our triangle is the surety. Now, this is typically an insurance company or a bank. You could just think of them as the guarantor. They're the ones providing the financial muscle that backs up the principal's promise to the obligee. So let's connect the dots and see how this triangle works in practice. It all starts with the obligee, let's say the ERA, who tells the contractor, hey, if you want this job, you need to get a bond. So the principal, Sunshine Construction, goes to a surety, an insurer, to get that bond. The surety then provides a financial guarantee directly to the ERA. See how that works? It creates this perfect loop of accountability. If Sunshine Construction fails, the insurer has to step in and make things right for the ERA. But here's the thing. It's not just one single bond that covers everything from start to finish. Nope. In fact, different types of bonds are used at very specific stages of a project, each designed to manage a different kind of risk. So let's follow the timeline and see how these bonds protect a project every step of the way.
Okay, so right at the very beginning, during the bidding phase, you have what's called a bid bond. This just makes sure that anyone bidding is actually serious. If you win, you have to sign the contract. Then, once the work actually starts, a performance bond kicks in. This is the big one, the one that guarantees the project will actually be completed. Now, what if the project owner gives the contractor money up front for materials? Well, that's where an advance payment bond comes in to protect those funds. And get this, even after the ribbon is cut and the project's done, a maintenance bond can cover any defects that might pop up later on.
This table gives us a really great summary. You can see how each bond has a very specific job to do. You've got the bid bonds to make sure bidders are serious, the performance bond to guarantee the work gets done, the advance payment bonds to protect that upfront cash, and there are even others, like supply bonds, which are used in procurement just to guarantee that the goods you ordered will actually be delivered. Each one is like a specialized tool for a very specific risk. Okay, so this brings up a really interesting question. If the contractor completely fails and the insurer has to pay out, say, millions of dollars, does the insurer just eat that cost? Do they just lose all that money? Well, not exactly. And this is where a crucial legal agreement called a Counter Indemnity comes into play. And this quote from the source material really just sums it up perfectly. It's the mechanism that shifts the ultimate responsibility right back to the contractor. It puts the financial burden back where it belongs, on the one who failed to perform in the first place. So here's how it works, broken down into 3 simple steps. First, the contractor fails to deliver on their promise. Second, the insurer, the surety, steps up, honors the bond, and pays the project owner to cover their losses. But here's the final and most important step. Thanks to that counter indemnity agreement, the contractor is now legally required to pay the insurer back for the entire amount. So the key takeaway is, while the insurer provides that immediate safety net, the contractor is always on the hook for the ultimate financial risk. Now, you might think an insurer could just guarantee pretty much any kind of financial promise, right? But that's actually not the case. There are really strict rules about what an insurance company can and can't issue as a bond. And it all boils down to the fundamental difference between what an insurer does and what a bank does.
The key distinction really comes down to this. Insurers are in the business of covering performance risk. That's the risk that a contractor won't finish the job like they promised. That is their lane. What they are strictly forbidden from covering is pure credit risk, like, say, guaranteeing a loan will be repaid. That's a bank's job, plain and simple. And regulators are super strict about keeping that line clear to protect the stability of both industries.
So if insurers can't handle these things, who does? Well, in a place like Ethiopia, the rules are divided up very clearly. Those financial loan guarantees for contractors, that's handled by banks, like CBE or Dashin. What about credit services, like small business loans? That comes from banks, microfinance institutions, or even digital platforms like Telebur. And those super risky unconditional bonds, the ones that have to be paid on demand, no questions asked, yeah, that's also the domain of banks. Insurers think to what they do best, guaranteeing performance.
All right, so let's quickly bring it all together. What are the key takeaways here? First, we learned that contract bonds create that triangle of trust between the project owner, the contractor, and the insurer. Second, there isn't just one bond. There's a specific, tailor-made bond for every single stage of a project's life. Third, that critical concept of counter indemnity means the contractor is always the one ultimately on the hook financially. And finally, don't forget that crucial line in the sand. Insurers cover performance risk, while banks cover credit risk. And all of this leaves us with one final thought to chew on. In a world of bigger, more complex, and more expensive projects than ever before, is this whole system of bonds and guarantees the absolute best tool we have for accountability? Or has it just become a necessary but super complex layer of bureaucracy? It's definitely something to think about the next time you see a major project getting started. Thanks so much for joining me.